Paul, for you is some of the moral and ethical concerns associated. Obviously, we talked briefly about, hey, it's going to come from my career, but I think more so around, hey, we're on the marketing side. We have our own process around that. We don't deal a lot with PII, but let's say Google Analytic data or other data, it's like, and that's essentially that's specific to an individual brand. It's not public facing. What are your thoughts on uploading that information, getting information around that? And then the other second part is data governance. I'm curious, just as a whole, they're related, of course, what your opinions are on that and how you can ensure people are feeling a little bit more confident, feeling a bit more safe with maybe some safeguards in place. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Fair concern. And I'm not sure you're going to enjoy the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. State of affairs, especially using LLMs, the reality is LLMs are more difficult to draw lineages between use of data and application of data than a machine learning algorithm. And that's already very black boxy, right?
Sure.
And if you were to string together multiple LLMs that are creating their own reasoning, it's almost impossible to create a lineage between those two worlds. So know that to be true going in, which is why we're probably not ready for a multi-agentic LLM orchestrated environment in a production use case, mostly because of this world. We have both a data quality concern that hasn't been fixed and a data lineage sort of magic that has to be resolved. And then, of course, data use and data bias problems, because as all of these LLMs are trained on corpuses of data that include just as much opinion as it does fact, which is the reason why it's only 67% good at public, where GPT-2 and 2.5 and below is trained on and the things that you'd find in a library, in a university, and then 2.5 and above was trained on everything else that happens in the internet. NLP got way better, answer correctness or accuracy got way worse compared. So apply that in a enterprise setting and all of a sudden you have the same boundary problem. In fact, so much so, the difference between consumer and enterprise is the difference between how important the answer is. In enterprise, the answer always has to be 7. It can't sometimes be 6, sometimes be 7, and sometimes 8, because you could be sued if you give them an 8 when it was supposed to be a 7. You have a reputational risk problem. What's interesting is that I've seen commercial use cases who treated an LLM implementation or an AI implementation as a BI solution versus a software engineering solution. Software engineers think about constraining the input and constraining the output. BI people say, just show me an amazing result. So you might have something that doesn't constrain what's the appropriate level of questions to ask and doesn't constrain what's the appropriate levels of answers to give. And you now have a reputational problem because it's now answering a political question with a political response in the voice of Hulk Hogan. And that isn't necessarily what you want your bank to showcase.
No, exactly.
Right? So you do have these black box governance problems in that you don't really control the input and the output if you don't think of it as a software engineering exercise. So governance becomes very important in terms of the data that you have and hold, the data you're allowed to use in those circumstances, and what are the expected results. In fact, data quality has been a problem for the last 30 years, and it continues to be a problem, right? 15 years ago, I had problems doing BI because my data was messy and siloed all over the place.